You check your bank balance and feel a specific type of anxiety, not about the number itself, but about what that number says about who you are as a person. This isn't financial stress. This is your brain rewiring itself based on how much money you control, and it happens at every single level of wealth in ways that would horrify you. But here's what nobody tells you about that anxiety. It's actually your brain's operating system updating itself in real time. When you have very little money, your mind enters what psychologists call scarcity mode. Every decision becomes a survival calculation. You walk past a coffee shop, and your brain doesn't just see caffeine. It sees rent money, grocery money, emergency fund depletion. Your neural pathways literally rewire to optimize for immediate threat assessment. This isn't weakness. This is your prehistoric survival mechanism kicking in, the same system that kept humans alive when resources were genuinely scarce. But here's the twist. This mental state doesn't just affect how you spend money. It changes how you think about everything. Time horizons shrink. Risk tolerance plummets. Your brain becomes hyper-vigilant about loss while becoming blind to opportunity. The cruel irony? This survival mode makes it exponentially harder to escape the conditions that triggered it. When your mind is constantly scanning for financial threats, you can't think strategically about financial growth. You become trapped in a psychological cage where the very mental adaptations meant to protect you end up imprisoning you. Most people assume this changes when you get more money, that once you hit some magic number, enough for rent, enough for security, enough for comfort, your brain switches back to normal mode. But that's not how wealth psychology actually works. Because what happens to your mind when scarcity disappears reveals something far more disturbing about human nature itself. When you finally escape financial desperation, your brain doesn't celebrate, it panics. You'd think having enough money would feel like relief, but instead it triggers a completely different psychological trap. Your mind, now freed from constant survival calculations, suddenly has bandwidth to discover something terrifying. Everyone else has more than you. This is where the comparison engine boots up. When you're broke, you compare yourself to other broke people. When you have some money, you start comparing yourself to people with real money. Your reference group shifts upward, and suddenly your modest success feels like failure. The same brain that was hyper-vigilant about losing $20 now obsesses over not having $20,000. But here's the psychological twist that keeps therapists busy. This isn't about the money anymore. It's about status anxiety. Your brain starts interpreting wealth as a ranking system, a public scoreboard of your worth as a human being. Every purchase becomes a signal. Every financial decision carries social weight. You're not buying a car, you're broadcasting your position in the hierarchy. The mental energy required to maintain this performance is exhausting. You develop what researchers call lifestyle inflation anxiety, the fear that any reduction in spending will expose you as a fraud. Your identity becomes entangled with your consumption patterns. You can afford the nice restaurant, but you can't afford to be seen as someone who can't afford the nice restaurant. This creates a psychological prison with golden bars. You have enough money to be comfortable, but not enough to stop worrying about money. And just when you think more wealth will solve this problem, you discover that the richest people have the strangest relationship with money of all. What nobody prepared you for is how wealth warps your perception of reality itself. When you accumulate serious money, the kind that generates passive income, the kind that makes work optional, your brain undergoes a fundamental rewiring that's almost impossible to reverse. You stop experiencing the world the way normal humans do. First, your relationship with consequences disappears. When you have enough money to absorb any financial mistake, your brain stops calculating risk the same way. Bad investment? Annoying, not devastating. Market crash? Portfolio adjustment? Not life crisis. This sounds liberating, but it creates a dangerous psychological blind spot. You begin making decisions in a consequence-free bubble, while everyone around you lives with real stakes. Then, something even stranger happens. You develop what psychologists call wealth isolation syndrome. Your problems become incomprehensible to most people. You can't complain about investment losses without sounding tone-deaf. You can't discuss inheritance taxes or asset protection strategies at normal dinner parties. Your daily concerns exist in a parallel universe that most humans will never access. The isolation compounds because wealthy people start surrounding themselves with other wealthy people, not from snobbery, but from psychological necessity. Only they understand your reference points. Only they won't judge you for problems that sound like luxury complaints. But this creates an echo chamber where your sense of normal becomes completely detached from actual normal. Here's the disturbing part. This isn't just about lifestyle differences. Wealthy brains literally process empathy differently. When you haven't worried about basic survival in years, you lose the ability to viscerally understand what financial stress feels like. But the psychological changes don't stop there, because extreme wealth unlocks the darkest aspects of human psychology. Here's where wealth psychology takes its darkest turn. When you have enough money to influence systems rather than just participate in them, your brain develops what researchers call God mode thinking. You stop seeing other people as equals and start seeing them as variables in equations you can control. This isn't conscious malevolence. It's a cognitive shift that happens gradually. When you can solve most problems by writing checks, you begin viewing human suffering as a resource allocation issue rather than genuine tragedy. Homelessness becomes a policy puzzle, not a collection of individual human disasters. Your brain categorizes people into useful and non-useful, rather than fellow humans deserving basic dignity. The psychological mechanism behind this is terrifying in its simplicity. When you have the power to change someone's life with a phone call or a donation, you unconsciously start believing you understand their life better than they do. You develop what psychologists call solution superiority complex, the conviction that your external perspective is more valuable than their lived experience. But here's the twist that makes this truly disturbing. This mental shift feels like enlightenment from the inside. You genuinely believe you're thinking more clearly, more rationally, more strategically than people trapped in day-to-day survival. You start seeing emotional responses to systemic problems as weakness rather than appropriate human reactions to injustice. The wealthy begin optimizing human systems the same way they optimize investment portfolios, looking for efficiency rather than dignity, scalability rather than compassion. They develop elaborate philanthropic strategies that feel generous but actually serve to maintain the exact power structures that created the problems they're supposedly solving. And this reveals the most disturbing truth about extreme wealth psychology of all. The most chilling realization hits when you understand that extreme wealth doesn't just change how you see other people. It fundamentally alters your relationship with truth itself. When you have enough money to shape narratives, fund research, and influence media coverage, your brain stops distinguishing between what's true and what's convenient for you to believe. This psychological shift happens because wealthy individuals rarely encounter unfiltered information anymore. Staff members learn to present problems in ways that don't upset you. Advisors frame recommendations around your existing beliefs. News sources cater to your demographic. Gradually, your version of reality becomes a carefully curated bubble, designed to confirm your worldview while protecting your wealth. The dangerous part isn't that you become delusional, it's that you become convinced you have access to superior information. You start believing that your wealth gives you special insight into how the world really works. You dismiss criticism as jealousy and attribute disagreement to ignorance. Your brain interprets your financial success as proof that your understanding of reality is more accurate than everyone else's. This creates what psychologists call wealth-based epistemic closure, a mental state where you can only process information that validates your existing position. You become psychologically incapable of considering that your wealth might be built on systems that harm others, because acknowledging that truth would require dismantling the very foundations of your identity. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. This isn't just individual delusion. When enough wealthy people share the same distorted reality, they have the resources to make their version of truth become the dominant narrative. And that's when wealth psychology stops being a personal problem and becomes a civilizational threat that reshapes society itself. The scariest part? You're already somewhere on this spectrum. Your brain is already being shaped by whatever your bank balance says right now. The only question is whether you're aware of it or whether you think you're the exception. So here's the real question. Which stage are you in right now? And more importantly, are you moving toward the next one? Or are you already trapped in it without knowing? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one.